Welcome back, guys, to Battleground Stories. Before we start the video, hit that subscribe button. Thank you. That night, the fog was so thick you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. That's what I remember most. Not the fear, not the chaos, that suffocating white blanket that swallowed everything up. October 2019, deep in the Cascade Mountains of Washington State. Our team, Echo Team, 5 soldiers from the 2nd Battalion, descended into the wilderness for what command called advanced night navigation under adverse conditions. Hike through the mountains at night, reach 3 checkpoints, report your location by radio, and reach the rescue team at dawn. Standard stuff. Most units finished without incident. They said the Cascades would be different. Tougher terrain, denser forest, weather unpredictable. They weren't kidding. I'm Sergeant Daniel Mercer. Everyone calls me Dan. 42 years old, 15 years in service. I'd seen equipment fail, seen weather turn missions sideways, but I'd never seen anything like what happened that night. Our team, Staff Sergeant Luis Ortega, 36, sharp-tongued and sarcastic. Lieutenant Aaron Keene, 27, rigid as steel, always by the book. Private Chris Hall, 21, youngest on the team, eager but nervous. And Private Nathan Cole, 25, quiet, grew up hunting in Montana, could track a deer through a snowstorm. We started just after sunset. The forest was already dark, canopy choking out moonlight. We moved in tight column, packs heavy, rifles slung, night vision goggles turning the world green and black. First hour went smooth. Hit checkpoint 1 without issue, kept moving. Terrain was steep, roots everywhere, moss on every surface. Then the fog came in. Started slow, wisps between trees. Within 20 minutes, visibility dropped to maybe 10 feet. Nathan raised his fist to signal a halt. "Can't see the trail anymore," he said quietly. "Need to reorient." I pulled out my compass. The needle spun lazily, then settled northwest. I tapped it, shifted east. Tapped again, south. "Compass is acting up," I muttered. Ortega checked his. Same thing. Needle wouldn't hold steady. Lieutenant Keene pushed forward. "Compasses malfunction. That's why we have GPS." He pulled out the handheld unit. Screen flickered, went black. Power button, nothing. "Battery's dead," he said, frustration creeping in. "We checked all batteries before insertion, sir," Hall said nervously. Everything was full charge. "Then it's defective." But we knew it wasn't. 3 compasses spinning and GPS dying at the same time meant something was wrong. "Radio check," I ordered. "Echo team to base. Do you copy?" "Static. Echo team to base. How copy?" More static. Then a sharp burst of noise, metallic, like knife on steel. Then nothing. Ortega tried his radio. Same result. We were cut off. "Signal could be poor in this area," Keene said. "We keep moving. Find higher ground. Re-establish contact." "Sir, we don't know which way higher ground is," Nathan said evenly. "Without compasses or GPS, we're blind. Then we use terrain. Find a stream, follow it. Sound logic, old school navigation. But something about the fog made me doubt even that. We formed up and kept moving. Nathan took point. The fog thickened. Even with night vision, I could barely see Nathan's back. That's when Hall stopped. "Did you hear that?" We froze. Weapons up, safeties off. And then I heard it. A voice. Faint. Distorted. Calling out. "Over here. This way." "That's Hall," Ortega said. "Wait, no. Hall's right here." Hall was standing beside Ortega, eyes wide. "That's not me," Hall whispered. The voice came again, same tone, same cadence, but wrong. "Help. Over here. Direction," Nathan asked. The voice seemed everywhere and nowhere, bouncing off trees swallowed by fog. "Can't tell," I said. Keene keyed his radio. "If that's another team, identify yourself." Static, then metallic scraping, then the voice, clearer. "Hall, come this way." Hall's face went pale. That sounds like me, but I didn't say anything. Audio phenomenon, Keen said, voice tight. Echoes. Fog playing tricks. Echoes don't call you by name, Ortega muttered. We keep moving, I said. Stay tight. No one leaves visual range. We pushed forward, slower now. The fog was so thick I could taste it, damp and cold in my lungs. The forest felt wrong. Too quiet. No animals. No insects. Nathan found the stream 30 minutes later. Fast water over rocks, sound almost comforting. We followed it downstream. That's when Nathan stopped again, crouched low, studying ground. Sarge, he said quietly, you need to see this. I moved beside him. In the mud along the stream, pressed deep into soft earth, were tracks. Not boot prints, not animal tracks I recognized. Each print was massive, 18 inches long, maybe more. 5 toes, clearly defined, wide heel, an arch that looked almost human, but no human foot left prints that big. Bear? Keen asked, unconvinced. Wrong shape, Nathan said flatly. Bears don't walk upright long distances. These are bipedal, consistent gait. Hall knelt beside them. How fresh. Very. Edges haven't collapsed, maybe an hour old. I scanned the tree line, rifle raised. Fog swirled around us, impenetrable. Could be a prank, Ortega offered. Fake tracks. Look at the depth. Whatever made these weighs 304 pounds. We found more tracks following the stream, always alongside us, never crossing, but close enough to let us know we weren't alone. Then the radio crackled, not static. A voice, distorted, broken. Echo team, this is base. Respond. I grabbed my handset. Base, this is Echo team, we copy. We've lost navigation. Request immediate. Transmission cut off with sharp burst of noise. Silence. Then the voice again, different. Wrong. Chris. Where are you, Chris? Hall's eyes went wide. That's my mom. That's my mom's voice. It's not, I said firmly. It's interference. But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. The voice came again, and this time it was my voice, my exact voice. Everyone stay calm. Just stay calm. I hadn't said those words, but it was me, perfectly me. What the hell is going on? Ortega asked, sarcasm gone. Before anyone could answer, we heard it. A sound. Deep, resonating, not quite growl, not quite roar, something in between. It vibrated through the trees, through the ground, through my chest. It lasted maybe 3 seconds, then stopped. Hall was breathing too fast, edge of panic. Nathan had rifle trained on fog. Even Keen looked shaken. We need to move, I said. Now, stay together. We moved faster, following the stream, boots splashing through shallow water. Fog pressed closer, thicker. That's when Hall's radio crackled again. Echo team, contact imminent. Fall back to extraction. That's base, Keen said, grabbing his handset. Base, this is Echo team actual. Say again your last. Static, then clearer. Hostile contact, multiple unknowns. Extract immediately. Do not engage. Hostile contact, Ortega said. What the hell does that mean? Echo team, acknowledge, the voice said. We acknowledge, Keen responded. What is the nature of the threat? Static. Then nothing. We stood there, weapons up, hearts pounding. Base had told us there was a threat, multiple unknowns, but hadn't said what. Hall, I said. Radio check. Confirm your position. Hall lifted his handset. Echo team, this is Hall, position unknown, equipment failure. Following stream southwest, visibility near 0. He released the button. Silence. Then his own voice came back, but wrong. Off. Position unknown. Help me. I can't find the way. Hall stared at his radio, face white. I didn't say that. And that's when we realized Hall wasn't next to Ortega anymore. He was gone. I spun around. Ortega, Nathan, Keen, 3 of us. Hall had been right there, 30 seconds ago. Hall, I shouted. Chris! Nothing. Hall, sound off. The fog swallowed my voice, and then, from deep in the trees, we heard him scream. The scream cut through the fog like a knife. High, desperate, unmistakably Hall. Move, I shouted, and we crashed into the undergrowth, heading toward the sound. The fog was so thick we were running blind. Branches whipped my face. Roots grabbed at my boots. Nathan was ahead of me, rifle up, moving fast. Ortega right behind, breathing hard. Lieutenant Keen bringing up the rear, shouting Hall's name. Chris. Chris, sound off. Nothing, just the sound of our boots pounding wet earth and our ragged breathing. We broke into a small clearing, stopped, listened. Silence. Hall, I called. If you can hear me, fire around. Let us know your position. We waited. 10 seconds. 20. Nothing. He was right there, Ortega said, chest heaving. I'm telling you, man, he was right next to me. I looked away for 1 second, and he was gone. People don't just vanish, Lieutenant Keen said, but his voice was shaking. Then where the hell is he? Ortega snapped. Nathan crouched low, studying the ground with his flashlight. The beam cut through the fog, illuminating trampled ferns and disturbed soil. Boot prints, he said. Hall's, leading that way. He pointed into the trees. But look at this. He moved the flashlight slightly to the left. There, pressed into the mud beside Hall's prints, were others. The same massive tracks we'd seen by the stream, fresh, deep. Whatever made these was following him, Nathan said quietly. My stomach twisted. Can you track them? Yeah. But Sarge. He looked up at me, and I saw something I'd never seen in Nathan's eyes before. Fear. These tracks are bigger than before, and there's more than one set now. Lieutenant Keen pushed forward. We don't have time for speculation. Hall is out there, disoriented, possibly injured. We execute a grid search. Stay in visual contact. Move systematically. Sir, with respect, we can't do a grid search in zero visibility, I said. We'll lose each other the same way we lost Hall. Then what do you suggest, Sergeant? We follow the tracks. Nathan can track. We move slow, stay tight, and we find Hall. Keen looked like he wanted to argue, but he nodded. Fine. But we do this by the book, weapons ready. If we encounter hostiles, we engage only if threatened. Hostiles, Ortega said. What hostiles? We're in the middle of nowhere. Base said hostile contact, Keen said. That means something's out here. Yeah, Ortega muttered. Something that leaves 18-inch footprints. We formed up, Nathan on point, following the tracks. I stayed right behind him, Ortega and Keen flanking. We moved through the forest like ghosts, every sense on high alert. The tracks led us deeper into the wilderness, away from the stream, away from any semblance of a trail. The forest grew denser, older. Douglas firs towering overhead, their trunks wider than a man could wrap his arms around. The fog clung to everything, muffling sound, distorting distance. Nathan stopped, raising his fist. What is it? I whispered. He pointed. Ahead, maybe 20 yards, something was moving. A shape in the fog, man-sized. Hall? Lieutenant Keen called. Chris, is that you? The shape stopped, turned toward us, and then it moved. Fast, disappearing into the trees. Hall! Keen shouted, and before I could stop him, he ran after it. Damn it! I hissed. Keen, stop! But he was already gone, swallowed by the fog. Everyone stay together, I ordered. We don't... A gunshot cracked through the forest, then another. Then Keen's voice, high and panicked. Contact. Contact. I have visual on... His transmission cut off. We ran. All three of us, sprinting through the fog toward the sound of the shots. My heart hammered. My mind raced. What the hell had Keen seen? We found him 30 seconds later, on his knees, rifle pointed at the trees, chest heaving. "What happened?" I demanded. "What did you see?" I don't know," he gasped. "It looked like Hall. Running." I called out. It turned, and... He trailed off, staring at nothing. And what? It wasn't Hall. The face. It was wrong. Too long. He shook his head, like he was trying to clear it. I fired. I hit it. I know I hit it, but it didn't go down. It just kept moving. Ortega scanned the trees, weapon raised. "What do you mean the face was wrong?" "I mean it looked like Hall, but it wasn't. I can't explain it." Nathan moved past us, studying the ground. He stopped, crouched low, then stood up slowly. "Sarge," he said, "you need to see this." I moved up beside him. On the ground, maybe 10 feet from where Keen had fired, was blood. Dark, fresh, leading into the trees. But mixed with the blood were tracks. Not boot prints. The massive prints. Multiple sets. And they were all around us. "They've been circling us," Nathan said quietly. "This whole time. We thought we were tracking them. But they were hurting us." I felt cold settle into my bones. "How many?" "At least 3, maybe more." Ortega's voice was tight. "What the hell are we dealing with?" Before anyone could answer, we heard it again. That sound, deep, resonating, closer this time, and from multiple directions. 3 distinct calls, answering each other. "They're communicating," Nathan said. "Communicating?" Keen said, voice cracking. "What communicates?" The radio crackled. "Echo team, extract immediately. Air support inbound. ETA 15 minutes. Mark your position with IR strobe and take cover." I grabbed my handset. "Base, this is Echo Team Actual. We have 1 man missing. Private Hall. We cannot extract without him. Negative, Echo Team. Extraction is not optional. Mark position and hold for air support. Do not engage unknowns. Repeat, do not engage." "They're leaving him," Ortega said, disbelief in his voice. "They're telling us to leave Hall out here." "We're not leaving him," I said. "Sergeant Mercer," Lieutenant Keen said, and for the first time, he sounded like he was actually leading. "Base has ordered extraction. They wouldn't do that unless the threat was real. We mark position, we hold, and when the helicopter arrives, we search for Hall with air support. By then, it might be too late. It might already be too late." The words hung in the air. I wanted to argue, wanted to say, we don't leave people behind. But I also knew Keen was right. Whatever was out here, it was big, it was coordinated, and Base knew about it. "Fine," I said. "We mark position, but we're not sitting still. We keep moving toward Hall's last known location. When the bird arrives, we're closer to him." Keen pulled the infrared strobe from his vest and activated it. Invisible to us, but bright as day, to anyone with IR capability. And then, the forest erupted. Not with sound, with movement. Trees shook, branches snapped. Heavy footfalls thudded against the ground from 3 different directions. "Contact!" Ortega shouted, swinging his rifle toward the sound. Through the fog, I saw them. Shapes. Massive. Moving between the trees. Not running. Not charging. Just advancing. "Hold fire," I ordered. "Don't shoot unless they attack." But even as I said it, I raised my rifle, sighting through the scope, and then I saw it clearly. 8 feet tall, maybe more. Broad shoulders, arms hanging low, covered in dark hair, matted and thick. The face. God, the face. Not quite human, not quite ape, something in between. Eyes that caught the faint light and reflected it back. Amber. Intelligent. It stood maybe 20 yards away, partially obscured by fog and trees, just watching. studying us. Jesus Christ, Ortega whispered. What is that? Another one appeared to our left. Same height, same build, and then a third behind us. We were surrounded. Form a circle, I said, voice steady despite the fear crawling up my spine. Back to back, cover all sides. We pressed together, weapons trained outward. Through the fog, I could make out at least 3 of them now, maybe 4. They weren't attacking, weren't making noise, just standing there, watching. Why aren't they moving? Lieutenant Keene whispered. They're deciding, Nathan said. Predators do this. Figure out if prey is worth the risk. We're not prey, Ortega growled. But his hands were white-knuckled on his rifle. One of them moved closer. Not aggressive, just curious. It tilted its head, studying us. The amber eyes fixed on me, and I felt my blood go cold. There was intelligence there. Not animal cunning, something deeper. It knew we were afraid, and maybe it was deciding whether to let us leave. Then the radio crackled again. Echo Team, air support 2 minutes out. Be advised, thermal imaging shows multiple large heat signatures in your vicinity. Recommend immediate defensive posture. Yeah, no kidding, Ortega muttered. The creature that had been watching me made a sound, not the deep resonating call. This was sharper. A grunt, a bark, almost like a warning. The others responded. Same sound. And then they started moving. Not toward us, circling. Slowly. Deliberately. They're boxing us in, Nathan said. On my mark, we move, I said. Southwest, fast, toward the extraction point. Stay together. If they charge, we fire. What about Hall? Ortega asked. We can't help him if we're dead. Lieutenant Keene looked at me, and I saw it in his eyes. The realization. We were abandoning Hall, leaving him out here with whatever these things were. 3, 2, 1, go. We broke formation and ran. Behind us, the forest exploded. Trees cracked. Heavy footfalls pounded the ground. That deep, resonating call echoed through the fog, and this time, it wasn't a warning. It was a hunt. I ran harder than I'd ever run in my life. Gear rattling, lungs burning, boots slipping on wet ground. Behind me, I could hear them. Close. Too close. Branches whipped my face. Roots tried to trip me. The fog made it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. Nathan was in front, somehow finding a path. Ortega beside me, breathing hard. Lieutenant Keene behind, and I could hear the panic in his footsteps. And then I heard the helicopter, the thump of rotors, distant but getting closer. IR strobe, I shouted. Keep it visible. Keene held the device high as he ran. The ground started to slope downward. We were descending. Fast. Too fast. And then Nathan went down. He hit something, a root or a rock, and crashed hard. His rifle flew from his hands. Nathan! I skidded to a stop, grabbed him, hauled him up. Behind us, maybe 30 yards away, they appeared through the fog. 3 of them. Standing at the top of the slope, not pursuing any more, just watching. Why did they stop? Ortega gasped. Nathan pointed ahead. Through the trees, barely visible, I saw lights, flashlights, and beyond them, the dark shape of a road. We're at the boundary, Nathan said. They don't want to leave the forest. The creatures watched us a moment longer. Then, one by one, they turned and disappeared back into the mist. We staggered down the slope, crashed through the underbrush, and stumbled onto the logging road. The helicopter appeared seconds later, searchlight cutting through the darkness, illuminating us in brilliant white light. As they pulled us aboard, I looked back at the forest. The fog still clung to the trees, thick and impenetrable. Somewhere in that darkness, Hall was still out there, and we'd left him behind. The helicopter ride back to base should have felt like salvation. Safety escape from whatever hell we'd stumbled into, but as I sat strapped into the seat, thermal blanket draped over my shoulders, all I felt was hollow. We'd left Hall behind. None of us spoke during the flight. Nathan stared at his boots, jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. Ortega had his eyes closed, but I could see his hands shaking. Lieutenant Keene sat rigid, staring at nothing, his face pale as death. The crew chief tried to offer us water. We took it but didn't drink. He asked if anyone needed medical attention. We shook our heads. What were we supposed to say? That we were physically fine, but had just abandoned one of our own to creatures that shouldn't exist? When we touched down at base, the rotors still spinning, we were met by people in different uniforms. Not our unit. Clean pressed fatigues with no unit patches. Just names and ranks. And in the center of them stood a woman in civilian clothes. Late 40s, sharp features, dark hair pulled back tight, glasses that reflected the floodlights. "Gentlemen," she said as we climbed out. Her voice was calm, clinical. "I'm Dr. Sarah Vance. I'll be conducting your debrief. Please follow me." It wasn't a request. They led us to a building on the far side of the base. No windows. Heavy security door. Inside, it looked more like a research facility than a military structure. White walls. Fluorescent lights. The smell of disinfectant that couldn't quite cover something else underneath. Something chemical and wrong. They separated us immediately, each into different rooms. I found myself in a space no bigger than an interrogation cell. Metal table, 2 chairs, a recording device with a blinking red light. Dr. Vance sat across from me. Another man, younger, was with her. He introduced himself as Dr. Chen, but didn't say anything else. "Before we begin, Sergeant Mercer," Vance said, sliding a document across the table, "you'll need to sign this." I picked it up. Non-disclosure agreement. Pages of dense legal language, but the message was clear. I would not speak about what happened tonight. Not to Emoasoma, anyone. Ever. Violation would result in court-martial, federal prosecution, and criminal charges. "What if I don't sign?" I asked. Vance smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. "Then we'll have to determine whether you're experiencing acute stress reaction, possible hallucinations, or other psychological breaks requiring extended observation and treatment. You'd spend the next 72 hours in isolation while we conduct psychiatric evaluations. Your family would be notified that you've had a mental health crisis." The threat was clear. Sign or be labeled unstable. I signed. Good. Now, tell me everything that happened from the moment you lost equipment functionality. I did. Every detail. The spinning compasses, the radio interference with our own voices, the massive tracks, Hall disappearing, the creatures, the way they'd surrounded us, the intelligence in their eyes. Vance took notes. Asked clarifying questions, never once looked surprised or skeptical. "Height estimate on the entities?" she asked. 8 feet, maybe more. "Build?" "Broad, muscular, arms proportionally longer than human. Eye coloration?" "Amber, reflective. Vocalizations?" "Yes, deep, resonating calls. They were communicating with each other, coordinating. Did they attempt to harm you directly?" I thought about it. The chase, the way they'd surrounded us. But they hadn't attacked. Not really. "No," I said slowly. "They herded us, circled us. But they didn't attack. It felt like they were warning us, pushing us out." Vance exchanged a glance with Chen. Something passed between them. "What happened to Hall?" I asked. "You need to send a search team." "He's still out there." "We have teams on site," Vance said. "They're conducting a thorough search. And if they find those things, that's not your concern, Sergeant." "The hell it's not. We left a man behind because you ordered us to extract. You knew what was out there. You sent us in anyway." Vance set down her pen. "Sergeant Mercer, what I know and what I'm authorized to tell you are different things. But I can say this. You are not the first team to encounter anomalous entities in that region. And you won't be the last. My stomach turned. How many times has this happened? That's classified. How many soldiers have you sent into those mountains? That's also classified. I leaned forward. What about Hall? We're doing everything we can to locate Private Hall. But, the way she said it, clinical and detached, I knew. They weren't looking for Hall to save him. They were looking for him to see what had happened, to collect data. We were guinea pigs, lab rats in some long-running experiment. What happens now? I asked. You return to your unit. You complete your service, and you never speak of this again. The official report will state that Private Hall became disoriented in adverse weather conditions and went missing during a training exercise. Standard search and rescue protocols were followed. No anomalies occurred. And the truth? The truth is classified. For reasons beyond your clearance level. She stood. Interview over. But I wasn't done. Why do you keep sending people in there? If you know what's in those mountains, why keep running exercises? Vance paused at the door. For the first time, something flickered across her face. Not quite guilt. Not quite regret. Something else. Because we need to understand them, Sergeant. Their patterns, their behavior, their numbers. The only way to do that is controlled observation. Your team wasn't sent there by accident. We were bait, I said flatly. You were researchers. Whether you knew it or not. She left. The door locked behind her. I sat alone in that white room, fluorescent lights humming overhead, and tried to process what she'd just told me. We'd been used, sent into the wilderness not for training, but to make contact with creatures the government refused to acknowledge existed. An hour later, they released us into a waiting area, all four of us. We looked at each other, and I saw the same realization in every face. We'd all been told the same thing. Sign the papers. Keep quiet. Pretend it didn't happen. This is insane, Nathan said quietly. He was always quiet, but this was different. This was broken. They can't just cover this up. What about Hall? They can and they will, Lieutenant Keene said. He looked older somehow. The rigid officer who'd started this exercise was gone. And we're going to let them, because we don't have a choice. We could tell someone, Nathan pressed. Media, Congress. And say what? Ortega snapped. That we saw Bigfoot. They'll destroy us. Dishonorable discharge. Label us crazy. Ruin our lives. He was right. The system was designed to protect itself. Did she tell you why? Nathan asked me. Why they keep sending people in there? Research. They want to understand these things. But why? Nathan's voice cracked. What's the end game? None of us had an answer. They released us back to barracks near dawn. The base was waking up. Soldiers heading to morning formation. Normal routines. Normal day. They had no idea what we'd been through. What we'd seen. What we'd lost. I lay in my bunk, exhausted but unable to sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them. Those amber eyes. That intelligence looking back at me. And I heard Hall's scream echoing through the fog. For 3 days, we waited. They wouldn't let us leave base. Wouldn't let us participate in the search. We sat in our barracks, confined to quarters, while teams went into those mountains looking for Hall. Ortega stopped eating, just sat on his bunk, staring at the wall. Nathan paced constantly, wearing a path in the floor between his bunk and the window. Lieutenant Keene filled out paperwork, writing and rewriting his report, trying to find words that would explain what happened without actually explaining anything. And I tried to sleep. But every time I closed my eyes, I was back in that fog, hearing Hall scream. On the second day, they brought in a counselor. Military psychologist. She asked us how we were coping, if we needed to talk. Standard post-traumatic stress protocol. Ortega told her to get out. The psychologist reported that we were displaying expected grief responses to the loss of a team member. She recommended continued observation but cleared us for duty. They were covering their asses, making sure if we broke later, there was documentation showing they'd provided mental health support. On the morning of the third day, Lieutenant Keene was called to command. He came back 2 hours later, his face pale. "They found him," he said quietly. "We didn't ask how. We didn't want to know. Not yet." That afternoon, they showed us the scene. Not in person, they wouldn't let us anywhere near the recovery site. But in a sterile briefing room, they displayed photographs on a screen. Clinical, detached, like they were showing us evidence from someone else's case. The official story was bear attack. They had experts, wildlife specialists who pointed to claw marks, tissue damage, signs of predation. They showed us scat samples, territorial markings, everything you'd expect from a large predator encounter. But I'd been in the woods. I'd seen what was out there. Hall's gear was scattered across a clearing maybe a quarter-mile from where we'd lost him. His pack torn open, contents strewn about. His rifle lay against a tree, the barrel bent at an impossible angle. The stock snapped clean through. You don't bend a military rifle like that, not without hydraulic pressure or deliberate, enormous force. And the arrangement, that's what bothered me most. His gear wasn't scattered randomly, the way it would be if an animal had attacked. It was placed, methodical, like someone had gone through his equipment piece by piece and left it displayed. They showed us photographs of tracks around the site. Bear tracks, they said, large, recent, multiple animals, but I'd seen those tracks before. 18 inches, 5 toes, bipedal stride. They showed us one photograph of Hall, just one, enough to identify dental records. They didn't show us the rest, said it wasn't necessary, said we should remember him as he was. Lieutenant Keene accepted it, nodded, signed the forms confirming identification, but after the briefing, Nathan grabbed my arm and pulled me aside. "That wasn't a bear," he whispered, his voice tight. "I've guided hunts in Montana for years. I've seen what grizzlies do to bodies. This was different." Different how? The tracks at the scene. I saw them in the photos. They tried to show us bear tracks, but there were others mixed in, the same ones we saw that night. And Hall's gear, the way it was arranged. He paused, looking around to make sure no one was listening. It was deliberate, intentional, like they were making a point. What kind of point? Stay out. This is our territory. Next time we won't just take one. I wanted to argue, wanted to say he was reading too much into it. But I couldn't, because I'd seen the intelligence in those amber eyes. Whatever those things were, they weren't mindless animals. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Hall, about those last moments. Had he been alone? Had he seen them coming? Had he fought? Or had they just taken him? Around 300, I gave up on sleep and went for a walk. Found Ortega outside, sitting on the steps, smoking a cigarette even though he'd quit 3 years ago. "Can't sleep either?" he asked. I shook my head. "You?" Every time I close my eyes, I hear him screaming. He took a drag, exhaled slowly. "We left him, Dan. We just left him. We didn't have a choice. Didn't we?" He looked at me, and I saw something I'd never seen in Ortega's eyes before. Guilt, raw and bleeding. What if we'd stayed? What if we'd kept looking? We'd probably be dead too. Yeah, probably. He flicked ash from the cigarette. But at least Hall wouldn't have died alone. I didn't have an answer for that. We sat in silence for a while. Then Ortega said something that made my blood run cold. "You know what the worst part is?" They knew. Command knew what was out there. They sent us in anyway. Hall's death wasn't an accident. It was acceptable losses. We don't know that, don't we? He stood up, crushed the cigarette under his boot. That Dr. Vance. She wasn't surprised by anything we told her. She had questions ready, specific questions, about height, eye color, behavior. Like she'd asked those questions before. He was right. I'd noticed it too, but hadn't wanted to acknowledge it. "How many others?" Ortega asked. "How many teams have they sent into those mountains? How many soldiers have they sacrificed for their research?" I didn't answer, because I was starting to wonder the same thing. The next day, they held Hall's memorial service. Full honors, flag-draped coffin, though we all knew what was inside wasn't really Hall anymore. Just enough for dental records and DNA confirmation. His family came, mother, father, younger sister. They cried. They thanked us for serving with him. They said he'd always wanted to be a soldier, always wanted to serve his country. His mother hugged me. "Thank you for being there with him," she said. "It must have been terrible, losing him in an accident like that." But at least he wasn't alone. I couldn't speak, couldn't tell her the truth, that we'd left him, that it wasn't an accident, that her son had died because someone in command decided gathering data was worth more than his life. I just nodded and let her hug me while guilt ate me alive. After the service, Lieutenant Keene gathered what was left of Echo Team. Just the four of us now, Hall's absence like a wound that wouldn't close. "I've put in for a transfer," Keene said. "They're sending me to Germany. I leave in 2 weeks." "Running away?" Ortega said, but there was no heat in it. "Maybe," Keene admitted, "but I can't stay here. Can't look at those mountains every day knowing—" He trailed off. "What about you?" Ortega shrugged. "Requested transfer to Texas. Flattest, most open place I could think of. No forests, no mountains, no fog." Nathan was silent for a long moment. Then, "I'm getting out. Contract's up in 4 months. I'm done." "And you?" Keene asked me. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Part of me wants to run, but another part." I looked toward the mountains, barely visible in the distance. "Another part wants answers. Answers will get you killed," Ortega said. "Or worse. They'll make you disappear, label you unstable, ruin you. Maybe. But Hall deserves better than being written off as a training accident." "Hall's dead," Ortega said flatly. "Nothing we do will change that." He was right, but that didn't make it easier. Over the next few weeks, Echo Team dissolved. Ortega shipped out to Texas, never looked back, never returned my calls. Nathan finished his contract and went home to Montana. I heard later from a mutual friend that he'd sold all his hunting gear. Wouldn't even walk in the woods behind his house. Lieutenant Keene made major eventually. Spent his career overseas, far from any deep wilderness, far from any memories of that night. And me, I stayed in for another 8 years. But something had changed. I started paying attention to things I'd overlooked before. 3 days later, they found Hall's body, or what was left of it. They told us it was a bear attack. Showed us photos of the scene carefully selected to support that narrative. Showed us the evidence of bear activity in the area. But I'd seen the tracks. I knew what bears did to bodies. This was different. Hall's gear was scattered across a wide area. His rifle bent like someone had folded steel with their bare hands. And his body, they said the damage was consistent with a large predator. But Nathan had pulled me aside after the briefing. "That wasn't a bear," he'd whispered. "I've seen bear attacks. This was something else." And the way his gear was arranged, it was deliberate, like they were leaving a message. What kind of message? Stay out. We buried Hall with full honors. His family was told he died during a training accident. Courageous service, ultimate sacrifice. They gave his mother a folded flag and thanked her for her son's service to his country. She never knew the truth. None of them did. Over the next few weeks, Echo Team fell apart. Ortega requested a transfer within days. They sent him to a base in Texas, far from any mountains or forests. Nathan finished his contract and went home to Montana. But I heard later he never went hunting again. Couldn't bring himself to walk into the woods. Lieutenant Keene stayed in, climbed the ranks, never mentioned that night again. Last I heard, he was a major, stationed overseas, still playing by the book. And me, I stayed in for another 8 years before getting out. Took a job as a contractor, worked security, tried to build a normal life. But I never forgot that night. Never stopped wondering what really happened to Hall in those final moments. Never stopped seeing those amber eyes watching us from the fog. It's been 5 years since I left the military, 5 years since that night in the Cascades. And I've started to notice things, patterns, other soldiers, other bases, other encounters, always vague, always classified, always buried under layers of denial. But the pattern is there if you know where to look. I started digging about 2 years after I got out. Couldn't help myself. The questions wouldn't leave me alone. What happened to Hall? What were those things? And most importantly, how many others had gone through what we went through? I took a job as a contractor, doing security assessments for construction projects in remote areas. It kept me moving, kept me distracted, but it also put me in places most people avoided. Deep wilderness. Areas marked on maps, but rarely visited. And that's when I started finding things. It was in northern Idaho, near the Selkirk Mountains, when I met Bill Hendricks, Forest Service liaison, 30 years in the mountains. When he found out I was former military, something changed in his expression. "You ever work in Washington?" he asked. "Cascade Range?" I kept my face neutral. "Why do you ask?" "Because you've got the same look." He pulled out a folder, slid it across his desk. "This is off the record." Inside were incident reports, dozens of them, dating back to the 1970s. Loggers reporting equipment vandalized, massive trees pushed over, strange vocalizations at night, search and rescue operations that turned up nothing. No bodies, no blood, just abandoned gear and enormous footprints the reports always described as bear tracks, unusual size. "How many disappearances?" I asked. 17 confirmed in this region alone over 40 years, probably more unreported. He tapped the folder, and every time, the Forest Service closes the area temporarily, then quietly reopens it. No explanations, no follow-up. You think the government knows. I think the government has always known. And I think people like you, soldiers sent into those mountains, you're all part of something bigger. I should have walked away, should have cited my NDA and left. But Hendricks had lost friends to those mountains. He deserved something. "If the Forest Service closes an area," I said carefully, "believe them. And if you're ever in deep wilderness and things start feeling wrong, compasses spinning, radios dead, silence in the trees, don't investigate. Leave. Fast." He nodded slowly. "That's what I thought." After that meeting, I couldn't stop. I started using old contacts, calling in favors, piecing together fragments. What I found was a network of incidents stretching across the Pacific Northwest, the Rockies, the Appalachian Mountains, anywhere with deep, old-growth forest. The reports were always similar: equipment failure, unexplained disappearances, strange sounds, massive tracks, and always, government agencies showing up, conducting investigations that went nowhere. I found references to something called Project Sentinel, buried in declassified documents from the 1960s. Heavily redacted, but the gist was clear. The Department of Defense had been monitoring reports of unknown bipedal hominids for decades. The stated purpose was threat assessment. But reading between the lines, it was something else. They wanted to know if these creatures could be controlled, studied, used. I found job postings for wildlife biologists with security clearances that made no sense. Procurement records for specialized tracking equipment deployed to remote locations with no public explanation. And I found casualty reports, not official but buried in veterans' forums. Soldiers telling stories, training exercises gone wrong, encounters with aggressive wildlife, teams extracted under mysterious circumstances. Always the same pattern: sign the papers, keep quiet, move on. How many others had been through what we went through? I tried reaching out to Ortega. Took me months to track him down. When I finally got him on the phone, he was silent for a long time. "Why are you digging into this?" he finally asked. "Because I need to know if what happened to us was isolated or part of something bigger." "It's bigger," he said flatly. "Way bigger. And the more you dig, the more dangerous it gets. You've been looking into it too." "For a while." Then I stopped. His voice went cold. 3 months after I got out, a man showed up at my house. Government ID, said he was with the research program, studying post-traumatic stress in soldiers who'd experienced unusual wildlife encounters. Wanted me to participate in a study. Paid. "What did you say?" I told him no. He smiled, said that was fine, then told me he hoped I was adjusting well to civilian life, that sometimes the best way to process trauma was to let it go, not talk about it, not think about it, just let it go. Ortega paused. It was a threat. They wanted to make sure I stayed quiet. Did they come back? No, because I took the hint, and you should too. Whatever you're trying to find, it's not worth your life. But I couldn't stop, because the more I learned, the clearer the picture became. This wasn't about a few isolated incidents. This was systematic, a long-term operation to monitor and document an entire species that officially didn't exist. And they were getting more aggressive. I found references to live capture protocols in redacted military reports, equipment requisitions for tranquilizer systems powerful enough to drop large primates, construction contracts for secure holding facilities in remote locations. They weren't just studying these creatures anymore. They were trying to capture them. I thought about that night in the Cascades. The intelligence I'd seen in those amber eyes. The restraint. They could have killed us, but they didn't. They just wanted us out. What would happen when they realized humans weren't just passing through anymore, but actively hunting them? Remote training areas, unexplained equipment failures, teams going dark, then suddenly extracted. Official reports that read like cover-ups. How many times has it happened? How many soldiers have been sent into those mountains, those forests, not knowing they were part of an experiment? I've tried reaching out to Ortega. He won't talk about it, blocks my calls. I found Nathan's number, but it's been disconnected. Keen is too far up the chain now, too invested in the system to risk his career. So I'm left alone with these memories, these questions, and the biggest question of all, why? Are they trying to protect these creatures, or are they figuring out how to eliminate them? I don't know, and that terrifies me more than anything I saw that night, because I remember the way those things looked at us, the intelligence, the restraint. They could have killed us, easily, but they didn't. They just wanted us out of their territory. They showed mercy. And if the day comes when the government decides they're a threat, when the classified reports turn into operational orders, those creatures won't stand a chance. Not against what we can bring to bear. Sometimes I wonder if I should feel guilty for providing the data that might one day be used against them. But then I remember Hall's scream, the fear, the helplessness, and I think, maybe some boundaries shouldn't be crossed. Maybe some territories should stay unmarked on our maps. But I also know that's not how humans work. We push, we explore, we classify, we control, and somewhere in the Cascade Mountains, in the deep forests where the fog never lifts and compasses spin for no reason, they're still there, watching, waiting, living their lives in the shadows, while men in laboratories study reports and plan their next move. I just hope, when that move comes, they're ready. Because we sure as hell weren't. So why am I telling you this now? Why risk everything to share this story? Because silence is complicity. And I've been complicit long enough. If you're reading this, if you're listening, I have one request. Don't dismiss it as fantasy. Don't file it away as another story about creatures in the woods. The things in those mountains are real. The government programs studying them are real, and the moral questions about what we do with that knowledge are real. What you do with that information is up to you, but at least now you know. The way I wish I'd known before they sent Echo Team into the Cascades that October night in 2019. Watch for the signs, question the mission, and if you find yourself in fog so thick you can't see your hand in front of your face, with equipment failing and something large moving just beyond your sight, remember this: you're not the first. You won't be the last. But you can choose what you do with what you witness. You can sign the papers and bury the truth. Or you can remember, document. And when the time is right, speak. I've made my choice. Chris Hall deserved better than to be written off as a training accident. He deserved the truth. His family deserves the truth. And those creatures, whatever they are, deserve to be left alone. They're not monsters. They're survivors. A species that's learned to exist in the margins, in the places we haven't destroyed yet. Maybe we can learn to coexist, maybe not. But I know this: the wilderness is not empty. It never has been. And the things that live in the shadows have just as much right to exist as we do. Remember that. Remember Hall. Remember Echo Team. And when the day comes that you have to choose between silence and truth, I hope you're braver than I was. I hope you speak sooner, before it's too late. If this story meant something to you, hit that subscribe button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment telling us where you're from, and if you've ever experienced something in the wilderness you couldn't explain. Until next time, stay safe out there. And remember, some boundaries exist for a reason.